System was giving me a little bit of an issue, so I just wanted to make sure that it was actually going to work here. So cool. All right. And if anybody is out there, go ahead and give a little good morning in the chat. But in the meantime, let's get rocking and rolling. Looks like everything is good. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison. I'm a senior enterprise advocate at GitHub. And today we're going to see how we can automate tasks with GitHub Actions. Good morning, good morning. So we are live here. This session is going to be recorded and shared out later. But we are live, so please, by all means, feel free to go ahead and ask questions in the chat down below. If you see me looking down, that's because that's where my screen is for all of chat. So that's sort of what I'm doing down there. But I'll be keeping an eye on that and doing my absolute best to answer questions. So without any further ado, let's make sure that my screen sharing is working. Cool. That looks perfect. Excellent. Let me see. I think I've got a layout option here. Let's see. I kind of like that first layout. We'll go with that. Okay, perfect. All right. So let's go ahead and get on into it. And what I want to start with is really highlighting the importance of automation. That when we think about delivering software, when we think about writing code, when we think about all the different things that we have going on a day-to-day basis in regards to development, there's an awful lot of tedium. There's an awful lot of additional things that need to happen that aren't just writing code. And this could include some of the things that might immediately come to your head of, oh, well, we need to deploy this out, or maybe we need to run security checks. But there's also a lot of other little things that need to take place as well. And so that might be that we need to resize images to ensure that when we put that out onto a page, that we've got like a proper sized thumbnail. It might be that we need to validate machine learning models and make sure that any updates that we have there are, in fact, pushing us in the right direction. And the catch is that with all of those, a lot of times the way that they're done is we'll just go ahead and have some external tool and somebody will go off and they'll do it on their own. And that really winds up costing us an awful lot of productivity. It costs us an awful lot of money because it's going to mean that those checks could be bypassed. We're going to take developers out of the zone, etc. And so automation really does become key to success. And if we roll this up into kind of the bigger picture of DevOps and focus a little bit more maybe on CI, continuous integration, CD, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, what we see is basically numbers that just jump off the page. That if you have good automation, if you have a good CI/CD process, you're going to be able to deploy quicker. You're going to be able to reduce the amount of time from commit to deployment. And you're also going to be able to recover from failure faster. That again, we just continue to see this, that depending on how good your automation process are, you're going to be faster to market, you're going to see improved product innovation, and you're also going to increase customer satisfaction because you're going to reduce the amount of time that it's going to take to respond to customer requests. So the TLDR on all of that is basically automation, good. Automation, move faster. So how do we do this then? And when we look out onto the landscape, what we're going to see is the fact that there are a ton of tools that are out there that will allow you to automate this. That obviously this is a problem space that many people are aware of and many people have gone out to try and solve. The catch is, though, that a lot of organizations, when they go out and they start kind of piecing all of this together, is they wind up with exactly that. They wind up with a piecemeal approach. And so now I have got to go to this tool to do this, and this tool to do this, and this tool to do this. And that leaves us with a complicated stack. It leaves us with developers needing to figure out how to use brand new tools. And it's also in turn going to mean that we're going to both increase the maintenance overhead, but also increase the chances that steps are going to be missed, steps are going to be bypassed, steps are going to be skipped. Because if my developer needs to go off and use this tool over here, they're going to be a little less likely to do that. They want to stay right where they are. They want to keep writing code. And that's where GitHub Actions comes into play, is let's meet our developers right where they are. And so with GitHub Actions, what we're going to notice is that all of that automation is literally a tab away. All of the definitions that we're going to have for all of our workflows are going to become part of the repository. So now my developers don't need to leave. Now my developers don't need to learn a full new set of tools, that they can keep doing what it is that they're doing, where it is they're doing it, and take advantage of this automation. So what's built into GitHub Actions? How is it that we are focused on creating this product? Let's kind of kick through a couple of slides real quick, and then we'll get into a little bit more technical, which I think is probably what most people are going to be here for. Number one is looking for that best developer experience. And this is true for, I think, really everything that we do at GitHub, that we want to make sure that developers love the tools that they have access to. That we have a slide, we've got 100 million. This is actually a true story. We do have 100 million developers on GitHub. And you don't reach 100 million by solely focusing in on business customers. That you hit that number by having developers that choose GitHub, that look at the tools that we have and go, hey, that's what I need. And that's because we focus in on making sure that we have that best developer experience. We talked already about having that automation right where you code. You'll notice it's going to be a tab away. You'll also notice those definitions will become part of the repository. One of the other very big things, one of my favorite phrases, is we're not launching rockets here. And the point that I'm making when I say that is whatever it is that we're doing, somebody else has already done. And so rather than us going off and recreating everything from scratch, let's take advantage of what's already out there. Let's build upon the work of others. And so we have a full marketplace of actually over 17,000 actions that are available. And so I can use these actions to now be able to put together my workflow. So I don't need to go off and create brand new scripts or do anything like that, that I can take advantage of what's already out there. And then last but not least is being able to scale. That as our projects grow, as the tasks become more complex, how can we continue to grow? And you can actually do this in a couple of different ways. That you'll have the ability to run things on-prem if you so desire, or you can run in the cloud, run on our cloud, and we can scale out with you as well. And we can also ensure that when you go to do deployment, that you're able to do that securely. Okay, so that's all of that. Let's go ahead and take a real quick sip of coffee here, always important. And then let's kick on into GitHub Actions and how we're going to do this, where we're going to do this, and a couple of different examples. So first up is to access all of your workflows. So my workflows are going to be some defined set of automated tasks that I want. To access all of them, see all the ones that are defined, see the history, etc. All of that's going to be right there off of the Actions tab. So I can just open up my repository, go to my Actions tab, and it's going to be right there. The next thing is the actual configuration. All of this is done as YAML files, and it's going to be stored inside of a special little folder here of .github/workflows. Now, I got to be honest with you here. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of YAML. I'll openly admit that, and I know there's a lot of people that get a little bit kind of funny about YAML, and I get it because of the fact that it's so based on white space, and it can sometimes be tricky to know exactly where it is that things need to be tabbed into, and so forth. That being said, though, I actually do find for defining workflows that YAML actually feels pretty natural here. So I actually do like YAML in this situation, which is not something that I often say, but it's very true here. So all of that's going to be inside of that workflow folder. And then last but not least, when you go to create a brand new workflow, you'll notice that there's a set of ones that will be suggested for you. That's provided both by us, and also you can create your own starter workflows as well. And these can be filtered based on the type of project. So if I do a .NET project, it's going to show me one thing. If I do a Node project, it's going to show me something different. And in this example here, it's got a Java project, and that is then showing you that. So we provide those, but you can also provide your own starter as well. Cool. So there's a question here is there a way that I, as an organization, could publish private actions and workflow templates to specific orgs, to specific GitHub orgs or your customers? So just to clarify real quick, what you're talking about is wanting to make that available to customers that are outside of your enterprise. Just to make sure that that's correct. Okay. Um, I think so, but I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I'm gonna be totally honest here. So let me give like a little bit of a little bit of background there. So you can obviously create your own actions, and you can do this by writing JavaScript. You can do this by creating shell scripts, and do a whole host of other things to create your own actions. And then you can actually publish them, I know for certain, in one of a couple of different ways. So one of the ways that you could do that is to push that out to the marketplace, make it available. It is also possible for you to publish out to your own enterprise. And the way that you do that is really just by making a repository someplace inside of an org inside your enterprise. And then when a workflow needs to call that, they just simply reference it just like they would something inside of the marketplace. Now, when you leave your enterprise, that I don't know the answer to that. I think the answer is yes, but I'm not 100% certain. Garrett, I know, is on the call, so I'm going to task Garrett here if he wants to take a real quick note, and I can follow up with you on that. You can also just drop me an email. Let me drop that into in a chat here. You can just drop me an email, and I'll get back to you on that. I want to say the answer is yes, but I don't know for 100% certainty, and then I also don't know how to do it, but I'll get back to you. That's a great question, though. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. But it is possible. I do want to make sure that I highlight that it is possible. I know for certain, I also do know how to do this, is to create your own actions and make them available for just your own enterprise. But as far as like sharing it out and kind of making it so that, you know, like you're setting up a subscription, I'm assuming, or something like that, that I'm not 100% certain. I think it's possible, but I don't know. Okay. In any event. All right. Let's get in and let's create our first workflow here. And the way that our workflows are going to be set up is we can either go to the Actions tab and we can create it from there, or we can go to that special .github/workflows and specify it inside of there. And I'm actually going to do a couple of demos, and I'll do one each way. So I'm going to start from here. So this little example that I have is a Node.js, Next.js React application. And right now, I don't have any actions defined. And so when I come over here to my actions, what I'm going to notice is it just gives me the list of suggested starters. And I could go ahead and choose one of these if I want, or I can create my own workflow. And when I create my own, what we'll notice is that we get the little inline editor right here. And you'll notice again that special .github/workflows folder. Okay, so what is the structure of the... Oh, not a problem. Clint, your wish has come true. There we go. Perfect. All right. Can we access this recording later? Absolutely. It will be up on YouTube. Okay. In any event, let's go ahead and let's create our first workflow. So when we're creating our workflows, one of the things that you're going to notice is there's a fair amount of flexibility into how you can truly structure them and define them. I'm going to go ahead and start with kind of a hello world because it's going to give me an opportunity to focus in on the basics. And then we'll go back and take a look at how we could implement end-to-end testing as kind of a little bit more of a real world example. So I'm going to start with kind of a basic, and then we'll get into a real world one after that. So first thing is a name. Just like that. I think this is kind of pretty well known, but naming things always going to make your life that much easier, especially because when I go into that actions tab, that name that I specify here is what's going to appear on the screen. And you have an opportunity to name most everything that when I go in and I create a job, when I create steps, etc., I have the opportunity to name most everything. And I recommend that you give everything a good name unless it's blatantly obvious as to what it is that it's doing. The next thing is the trigger. And this is what's going to start the workflow. And there's a lot of different triggers that are available. So this could be somebody creates a new issue, somebody creates a pull request, somebody closes a pull request, somebody pushes in new code. Like basically, if somebody sneezes in the general direction of a repository, you're going to be able to run something in response to that. And if you go check out the docs, you'll see the full list of triggers, and there's a whole host of them that are available. In my case, the trigger that I'm going to use is called workflow dispatch, which is a manual workflow. So I'm going to be able to choose when I want this to run. And so I'll see that when I get into my actions tab. Next up is the list of jobs. So the jobs is now what this workflow is going to do. I can define all of my jobs by giving them, of course, names, which I'm going to do in a second. But the big thing that you always want to remember about jobs is that by default, your jobs are going to run asynchronous. They're going to run in parallel. They're all going to run at the same time. So this can be a great way that if I know I need 3 or 4 things all to happen one shot, I can go ahead and do that right here. But what happens if I want to use my jobs to kind of break something down into smaller chunks, and I need to make sure that this one runs first and this one runs second and this one runs third? Not a problem. You can create relationships between your jobs. So what I can basically do is I can create a job here, and then I can create a job down below that says, hey, depend on that first one in order to run successfully. Okay, so let me give this a name, and this will be display greeting. Like that. And then now I can indicate where it is that I want this to run. So all jobs need a runner because after all, this is going to do something. This is going to run some code. It's going to run a bash script. It's going to run one of the actions from the marketplace. It's going to do something. So I need to identify where this is going to run. And by default, you'll have access to Windows, to Mac OS, and to Linux. Now, you can also go in and create your own custom runners in the cloud. And one of the biggest reasons that you'll do that is to choose the sizing of that. So if you want to get a bigger runner and you need that to run a little bit faster, you can do that. And you also have the ability to self-host your runners as well. So if you want to run that internal, maybe you've got specialized hardware that it needs to run on, you have that ability. In my case, I'm going to say Ubuntu latest. And then now I'm going to identify the steps that will actually be part of this, this workflow. And so let's go ahead and give this a name, print, or I'll just say, I'm going to call this run echo, like that. And then I want runs correct. I meant run. There we go. Okay. Nice having that little bit of a helper there to help point me in the right direction. And so now this is just going to run a bash script. And that is one of the nice things here is that you've got full flexibility. So you can use an action. You could also just run bash scripts. You can run JavaScript. You can sort of really do whatever it is that you want to do here. All right. So I've got my little hello world. We've got our basics. Let's go ahead and commit this directly to main. Chugga, chugga, chugga. And now it's right there. And now if I go over to my actions, now I can see that display hello world. I can run my workflow, hit run workflow, and then just give this a moment. There we go. And now I can open up my, my screen here, and then I can see this run. So what I'm doing here, what I've got here is this is now the log of that workflow. So I can watch this running. I can see a visual breakdown of all the jobs that are inside of here. And if I open this one up, I can now see everything that happened behind the scenes. So there's the little setup. There's that little run echo. And now I can see my hello world. So there is our first action. Cool. Sip of coffee. Now that's cute and all. But how about something that's going to be a little bit more real world? Okay, I hear you. So let's go back over here to my code and let's explore my project a little bit more. And what you're going to notice inside of my project is that if I open up my source folder, I'm going to have a Cypress folder. And if I open up my Cypress folder, I've got some E2E or some end-to-end tests. So if you're not already familiar, Cypress is a testing framework for web applications. It does end-to-end tests. So what I can do is actually have it run the page, and then I can explore the page looking for certain elements and certain behaviors and so forth. So I could script out, for example, hey, punch this into a text box, hit submit, make sure that the next page that comes up is what we want it to be. Or I can, like we have in this case, go look for a specific value here. So in this case here, you're going to notice that it's going to go look for an H1 tag and then make sure that it contains the word pets. So there is my end-to-end test. When we're thinking about automation, running tests is going to be a big part of that. And when we, again, sort of step back and get a little bit more into definitions here, one of the biggest phrases that you're going to hear is CI/CD. And sometimes those two terms are used interchangeably, but they really do mean different things. That CI, continuous integration, is the process of me bringing code into my code base. CD, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, is me taking that code, putting it into a package or whatever else it is that I need to do with it, and then pushing that out to where it needs to go. Bringing this back to CI, when we're running CI, we're typically going to be looking at some form of a build process. We're going to be looking at running unit tests. We're going to be running security checks. or in this case, we're going to be running our end-to-end tests. So I've already got this defined as part of the repository. The question now becomes, how do I make sure that that is going to be automated? And the answer for that is going to be doing that with an action. Now, I could go back to the Actions tab, and I could create a new workflow from here, but this action is going to be a little bit more complex. So I want a slightly better editor. So you're going to get a bonus tip as part of this. So I've got my repository right here, and I'm going to hit dot on my keyboard. And what this will do is this will now open up a very lightweight version of Visual Studio Code right here inside of my browser. This is completely free. This is built right in. If you are using GitHub Cloud, this is available to you. Everything that's running here is going to be in the browser. Now, what that does mean is that I'm going to have relatively limited support for extensions and things like that. But if all that I need is a lightweight editor with a bit of IntelliSense, this is perfect for the job. This is exactly what I want for that. And so what I can see right here is there is my workflows. Just like VS Code, I can go ahead and hit my new button up here. And now I can say run E2E tests.yaml like that. Okay. And now I'm just going to do all of that right here. So let me get that off to the side. Let me make this a little bit bigger. There we go. And let's start creating it. So again, name, and we'll say run Cypress tests. And then we'll go ahead and specify our on. Now, when we're talking about a situation like this, where I'm going to be running unit tests, and I want this as part of my CI, I want this as part of my continuous integration, I want to make sure that these run before we merge code into our repository. And so what I can now do is I can specify, hey, I want this to run on a pull request, like that. So now this is only going to run on pull requests. And I can also then specify that I only want it to look at specific branches. So for example, I only want this to run on the main branch. So when somebody makes a pull request into main, this set of tests is now going to run. Excellent. And I'm going to come back in a little bit and take a look at how we can enforce that, how we can make sure that we're not allowed to merge into main until those checks pass. We'll come back to that. All right. In the meantime, let's go ahead and create my jobs. Let's set up the first one. We'll call this run tests. And then runs on Ubuntu latest. And then our steps. Okay. So let's talk about this for a second. And let's sort of like kind of break this down. So what I want to do is I want to run some end-to-end tests. And those end-to-end tests are defined as TypeScript files inside of the project. So in order to do this, I'm really going to need two things. The first thing that I'm going to need is I'm going to need the code. And then the second thing that I'm going to need is the tests themselves. I don't know why you are bugging me about my iPhone. In any event, we'll get rid of that. Let's keep on moving. Okay, so two steps. I'm going to need to go grab my code, and then I'm going to need to actually run the tests. And if we remember back to something that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, these are common tasks. These are things that you would think people would want to do. And so sure enough, if I open up GitHub Actions Marketplace, then all of these are going to be available to me inside of here. So the first thing that I need to do is check out my code. I say checkout. Sure enough, there's an action right there. And then the next thing is if I do a search for Cypress, that I also see that there's a Cypress action as well. So both of those are right there, and I can now just take advantage of them. And you'll even notice they give you some nice little examples as well on how to do all of this. All right. So I'm actually going to do this. Let's make my life a little easier. Just going to go ahead and do a real quick copy, and let's do a paste, and then we'll kind of do a little bit of some editing here. Okay. So I don't need the runs on. I just need the steps. So let's just do that. Make sure that all of my tabbing looks good. Okay. So first thing that you're going to notice is we need to go check out our code. And so we're going to take advantage of that actions checkout. And then you'll also notice right here at the end, that little V3. What we're doing here is we're pinning this to a specific version of the action. And that allows us to know then what the code is that's going to be running as part of that action that we're using. So best practice, pin it to a particular version. Then you're going to notice down below, we've got our next step right here. That's going to do Cypress run. And that's now going to use that marketplace action to do our run. Now, for my end-to-end tests, there's actually a couple of things that I need to configure here. That I need to make sure that my project builds correctly. I need to make sure that things start correctly. And I also need to make sure that things are configured correctly, because this application uses a Mongo database. So how do I set all of that up? Well, each action is going to typically have some set of parameters that you're going to be able to specify. So if I scroll on down in the case of like the end-to-end test, you're going to notice that you can specify a browser of Chrome or Firefox. So if you want to do specific testing for one particular browser, you have that ability. You also have the ability to specify environment variables, which we'll get to in just a couple of seconds here. And if I keep scrolling on down, you'll notice we have the ability to specify where the tests are. And that's going to be done with project. And there's also the start and the build, which are down here eventually, which we can get to. Okay, so let's specify those. So I'm going to do that by doing with, and then we'll say our start command, which will be npm run start. Our build command, which will be npm run build. And then the project, which is going to be where our tests are going to be located, is going to be inside of src. I don't think I want a / on that. Let me go back and I'm just going to double check here. Okay, I do want the / Okay. /. Then last but not least is the environmental variables. So like I said, this needs to use a Mongo database somewhere. And that connection string is stored in an environment variable called MongoDB URI. Now, I could, if I wanted to, hard code a connection string here. But that's typically not something I want to do for two reasons. Number one is because that's going to make this less usable later on. But also because number two, later on at some point, I might want to run this with a different connection string. And I don't want to have to come back to this workflow and update this. That this is pretty true universally, that anything that's external, anything that might change, you typically don't want to hard code. So instead, I want to read this in from somewhere. And we can read this in from a couple of different places. So one thing that I could do is I could create a variable for this and pass that in. But the other thing that I could do is I can set up secrets. Now, with a secret, what we're going to see is that I'll be able to define this on the repository, and that will now be protected from viewing eyes from basically anywhere, that it will be passed into the action, but that is then going to be it. So now I've got this full action defined. So I've got my name up top. It says, hey, this is going to run anytime there's a pull request into main. And then what it's going to do is it's going to go check out my code. It's going to run that Cypress action by doing a start, a build. It's going to find all my tests in /source. And then last but not least is we're passing in that environment variable. Cool. Let me push this up into main from here. Add E2E tests. Beautiful. And then push that up. And now that is inside of my repository. Cool. And we can see that right here. All right. Now, what we're going to notice, if I come over here to actions, is that this hasn't run yet. And you're also going to notice I don't have an ability to run this. And the reason for that is that the trigger is based on a pull request. So we'll come back and make a pull request in a couple of minutes there. But I want to highlight our little secret. So I brought up the settings for my repository here, went over to settings. I'm going to scroll on down. Over here, I've got my actions. And now what we're going to notice is our secrets. Now, I use this repository for a handful of different things. So I've already got some secrets defined. Let me actually just get rid of that one so we can kind of walk through creating a brand new one. And I'm going to say new repository secret. And we'll give this a name, MongoDB URI. And then we'll give this a secret of in memory. And by the way, in memory, inside the application itself, there's a flag. And so it will look for this as the connection string. And if it sees that, then it will use an in-memory version of MongoDB. So that's what I'm setting up here. So let's now add that secret in. And now that's hidden away. That's tucked away. And in fact, if I go to edit this, let me hit my little edit button right here. You're going to notice that value is not there. So this is going to be write only. I'm not even able to read this value. It will be passed into the action. So the action will be able to use it. But I'm not going to be able to see that from here. Cool. All right. So now let's go ahead and create a pull request. So let me come over here to my source control. Let me create a brand new branch. And let's say update code, because I'm very creative in my naming. Switch over to that branch. Now we'll do a reload and give me an opportunity for a sip of coffee. If you pick up nothing else from today, coffee helps. All right. And so now let me open up my app.js. Let's go find my header. And currently that has the correct value in that. Currently that says pets. And let's give that a bad value. So let's say wrong header. Exactly. Colin's got the right idea. All right. Wrong header. Cool. So let's go back over here and let's give this a message of adds bad code. And boy, wouldn't it be nice if every pull request that was going to introduce a bug had a good commit message like that? Wouldn't that make our lives easier? Anyway, let's go ahead and commit that. Let's set up our pull request. And I'm doing this all right from here. So we've got that title, adds bad code. I'm going to make this a little more generic. Let's say updates header. Go. And then now let's go ahead and hit create. Okay, cool. So that's now created that pull request. And if I hit the link right up here, let me just open that in a new tab. What we're going to notice is inside the pull request, I can actually now see that check running. So this is now doing its thing, and it's doing its magic. let me go over to my Actions tab, and we can actually watch this. And this is going to take it a couple of minutes here to do its thing, because what it's going to need to do is to do a fair amount of like installing before it finally gets to a point where it can run the tests. So this is probably going to take it about like 3 or 4 minutes here. While this is doing its thing, it gives me an opportunity to kind of mention a couple of things. Thank you, Javier. I appreciate that. Number one is you do have an ability to specify larger runners. And there's a little bit of sort of like I don't necessarily want to say catch-22, but there's a little bit of a trade-off there. That when we think about using larger runners, we're of course going to have to pay for that. And the bigger the runner, then the more money you wind up having to spend on that. But on the flip side, your larger runner is going to run faster. And in the long run, it can actually save you money because it's then less downtime in having to wait for that to run. Okay, let's see. Timed out. That timeout. Why is that? Oh, I wonder. Hold on. I might have made a mistake. Hold on one sec. Hold, please. Let me just double check. It is MongoDB. It is in memory. Okay. All right. That error just doesn't look like the right error. That error does not look like the one that I was expecting. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to kind of highlight a couple of other things. So let me just go back to my secrets here and let me kind of refresh that and make sure that that looks good. So MongoDB URI. No, don't remove it. We can just edit it. And let's in memory update. Pretty sure I typed that correctly. All right. And now let's come back over here. All right. So I mentioned the fact that I wasn't able to manually run this job. But let's say that I've, made an update somewhere, like I just did. And now all I want to do is just rerun that right here. I always have an ability to rerun the job. And so when I hit this little drop down, you'll notice that you can rerun all jobs or just the failed jobs. So if I've got like 3 or 4 jobs and a couple of them are really big, but they all ran successfully, then I can just go to rerun failed jobs and have that run there. Okay. So let me just rerun this real quick. It's that timeout that just makes me a little nervous because I don't think that that's what it's supposed to be doing there. And if it is, that's fantastic, but I don't think that it's supposed to give me a different error message. Always so funny when you're expecting a failure, but it's the wrong failure. Okay. Let's see. And moving your mouse makes it go faster. And by all means, if you've got questions along the way, feel free to ask. Can I spin them up in a Docker container and run it on the VM? So I could run these tests manually myself and confirm that they work? Absolutely. Right now, there is not an ability to run actions locally. So the engine is only going to be available on GitHub, but otherwise, yeah. Yeah, see that. I swear to you, this worked yesterday when I ran it. Okay, I'm going to just trust that that is the right error message. I'm just going to trust that that's the right one. Okay, we'll go with that. All right, I am going to leave it in a failing state here for a minute, and we're going to go back and we're going to make a fix in a minute. But let's do this. So we were talking about continuous integration. And with continuous integration, again, build, run tests, etc. I want to make sure all that works correctly before we allow that code in. So what I want to do is I want to protect my branch, my main branch, from allowing any of that code in. And this is where branch protection rules come into play. So with a branch protection rule, what I can do is I can specify, hey, for my main branch, or for my deploy branch, or if you've got some form of a naming pattern, so maybe all of your deploy branches start with deploy dash, then I can say deploy dash and then star. And so now this protection rule would apply to all of those. So anything that starts with a star, or it starts with deploy dash. So in my case, I'm just going to apply this to main. Before our main branch, what do we want? So the first thing is I want to require a pull request before merging. Next thing is you can choose whether or not you want to require approvals. And I'm going to take that check away just because I'm the only developer right now. But normally, of course, you would want to require approvals. Now, there's a lot of other options that are available in here, and I'm not going to go through each one of them, but there's a couple I do want to call out. One of the biggest is require review from code owners. Code owners, if you're not already familiar with this little file, let me open up .github and then code owners. What code owners allows you to do is specify different files or different paths to have, well, code owners. And where does that come into play? That comes into play right here. So require review from code owners. And so what that would mean is, let's say that I've got my actions or my .github workflows folder. And that's now going to be owned by me as Geek Trainer. So any updates to that folder require approval from me. Or let's say that there's some other like special folder that you have where you always need to make sure that somebody reviews that code, then you can specify that right there. And so this allows you to ensure that for any of the more sensitive files, that they always get approval from the correct person. And where this becomes really important when we're talking about something like CI is it would be theoretically possible for somebody to bypass these checks. Because what they could do is they could make a pull request where they just remove the workflow. But if I add in a code owner, now they're not going to be able to do that because they're not going to be able to make that change without first getting the approval of that person. So that allows me to block that. Okay, let me undo those changes there. So I always like to call out that code owners. The other one is, it's all the way down at the bottom. Right here. Do not allow bypassing of the above settings. So by default, administrators have an ability to bypass those protections. This allows me to ensure that that does not happen. Is that option right there? Okay. So there's that. The next one that I want to highlight is right here on our status checks. So we now have a status check. That's our run tests right here. These are our Cypress tests. And so before we merge code in, I want to make sure that that runs. So let me just sneak into here and say run tests. And now that is going to be required in order for this to run. If I had implemented GitHub Advanced Security doing code scanning, this is the way that I would enforce that as well. And so now let me come all the way down to the bottom here. Let's hit create. And then now let's sneak back over here to our pull request. And let's open up that one that we made here. There we go. And now if I scroll down, what you're going to notice is that merge pull request is now grayed out. So I'm not able to merge this unless I bypassed those restrictions, unless I bypass those requirements. Okay. Rolando asked the question, speaking of security and access, are there any plans to have more granular setting on workflow themselves, useful when executed manually? Love to be able to say only X users can run this workflow. I know the answer to that question is yes. I don't know how far along that is, but I know that that is something that is in development of giving some level of additional control over who it is that's able to run those workflows and a little bit more finite control over, over exactly when. So the answer to that is yes. I don't have a release date on that though. Okay. Let me now come back over here. Let's go into my app.js. Let's update this to be the correct value here. Let's say pets. And now let's commit this in, add correct value, and let's push this up. And now because of the fact that I've now updated the code, here's what we're going to notice is when I go back into my pull requests and I go back to that updates header, because I updated that code, that refreshes the pull request, and this now automatically reruns that check. So I don't have to manually go back and rerun this if I've updated the code. That when I just update the code that's part of that pull request, it will automatically rerun that check for me. And I can also see the details here. That takes me back to the actions page, and then we can watch this run and hopefully it will work. Moving your mouse makes it go faster. Doing all the install, started the server. All of that looks good. And then there we go. Okay, that's funny. That error message was not the one that I expected, but I guess it was the right one. That's all right. It works. Cool. So let me open up my Cypress run. And what you will now notice, my little light is green. Everything has now passed. So that ran the test successfully. I scroll down. All of that looked good. And now when I come back to the pull request, what we're going to see, let me just refresh the page, is that now all of that is green, and then I'm able to go ahead and merge that from here. And that's also one of the things that I really like about using actions for things like this, is that everything is now going to be right here inside the pull request. So I can kind of see the full history. So not only can I see like the files that have changed and the commits that have been made and so forth, but I can also see the changes that were made along the way. I can see the test runs as well. So I can see the fact that that first test run failed. I can see the fact that that second test run succeeded, etc. So I get my full history right here. And going back to something that we were discussing earlier is, again, that fact of I now don't have to go somewhere else to go look up all that information. I can see all of that right here, right where I am already coding. Okay, cool. And I sort of demoed my way through the remainder of the slides here. So I'm actually just going to kind of kick ahead real quick and highlight just a couple of other last second features here. And I'm also going to bring my head back out. Can I share the slides? Yeah, if you just drop me a line. Here we go. Just drop me a line, and I can export these out to a PDF. Yeah, you can have at them from there. All right. couple of other last little features that I want to mention. Number one, on those starter templates, you have the ability to create your own starter templates as well. So in the case of, let's say, like Node applications that you always want to ensure that some particular workflow is going to be available, you can do that. You also have the ability to create your own reusable workflows, which is really basically a way to create your own internal actions library. So you can just define what the workflow is, and then you can have additional workflows point to that. And then right along those same lines, you can also create required workflows. So let's say that we're using advanced security, or let's say that we're using some form of unit tests. Then what I can do is I can set up a required workflow for my entire enterprise. And so now whenever a pull request is made, it will then become part of that required status check. Excellent. I mentioned already that ability to create larger runners. You've got that there. And I've done my demo. Check out github.com/github/roadmap to see the roadmap. All right, where do we go from here? So number one is, well, create some workflows on GitHub Actions that think about some of the things that you could automate. And chances are you can do that inside of Actions. Obviously, the kind of core ones that most people think about, CI, CD, 100%, but there's a lot of other things that can be automated as well. Take a look at your marketplace actions and do remember that you have the ability to exert control over them. So if you don't want to use any of the marketplace actions, you can say, hey, don't allow it. Or if you only want to allow ones from verified vendors, say like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, GitHub, etc., you can do that. Or if you only want to allow specific ones that you list, you can do that as well. So you get complete control over the use of those marketplace actions. And then last but not least is create that centralized library of starter reusable workflows. So that way you can start building upon the work of other people inside of your organization. Also, go check out the Actions docs. I'm going to go grab that link that Garrett shared earlier on Actions. There we go. And whoosh. Yeah. So go check out Actions and see some of the different places that you could go in and do automation. As Garrett mentioned, feel free to reach out to the startup team as well, startups@github.com. More than happy to answer your questions from there and to help you out. This is a series that we're going to continue to do every month. So we'll have a topic next month. I don't remember what the topic is, but we will have a topic next month that we'll get in and talk about something cool. Any last questions at all that you might have on Actions on automation? In that case, I'm going to thank everybody for tuning in. You can come find me on LinkedIn, email the startups alias, and go check out GitHub Actions. Thank you again to everybody for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your, what is today? Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thanks. Bye-bye.